do. Well, let's talk a little bit more about Gibraltar, because in the last couple of days it emerged as a major sticking point in the negotiations. Spain demanded assurances that it would have the right to veto any future trade agreement between the EU and the UK, which covered Gibraltar. Those assurances appear to have been given, but Theresa May says no concession was made over British sovereignty of the rock. Let's speak to Molly Cato, who's a British MEP for the Green Party. Her constituency includes the southwest of England and also Gibraltar. Molly, sorry to keep you waiting. I know you've been sitting there patiently to talk to us this morning. Let's get your thoughts, first of all, about what was given over yesterday. Lots of people here saying it was just a restating of what was in the text. What do you think?
Well, I think what's become clear from the discussions in the past few days is that actually, as we go forward in these negotiations, we have made ourselves in a weaker position. So Spain announced at the beginning that it had a veto over our future trade deal. That's always been the case. And they restated that, so there was a rhetorical change. But this is really just a restatement of the reality. As we leave the EU, we have no clue about what our future trading relationship will be like. And all of the EU 27, not just Spain, will have a veto over any aspects of it they don't like. So, you know, somebody said this morning, oh, next it'll be Greece and the Elgin marbles, and then it'll be the French and, you know, the dairy industry. And every single country will come for a piece of us during those negotiations. And that's why I think we cannot accept this deal that the Prime Minister's negotiated with absolutely no idea about what the future trade deal might be like. And as you just saw in the previous interview with Nigel Farage, he also thinks it's unacceptable. But I'm afraid to say people like him who've persuaded people to vote leave have absolutely no proposition. They're basically professional disruptors. In politics, you have to make a positive proposal. And, you know, the Prime Minister's deal is the best we could possibly have got out of Brexit. And that's why people like me campaign strongly for Remain, and that's why we think now we need to have a people's vote on this deal.
I want to come back to you on that in a second to get your reaction more fully to what Nigel Farage said, but tell me what the reaction has been from your constituents in Gibraltar.
Well, I was interested to see the reaction from Fabian Picardo, the Chief Minister, and he's obviously, you know, put all his eggs in the British government basket, and he's trusted the British government. But I have to say that several of the MPs that represent the people of Gibraltar are quite wary about that, because we think that, you know, we will be vulnerable in those trading negotiations. And Gibraltar has been incredibly pro-EU, 96% remain in the referendum, and incredibly loyal to Britain for 300 years. That loyalty must be repaid, but I think the best way to do that is to not put them at risk in the future trade negotiations. And I know that if we had a people's vote, then they would be voting strongly Remain along with me, just so we don't have to make ourselves vulnerable in this way.
So let's come back to what Nigel Farage was talking about in terms of the deal that is in front of the House of Commons. If it was voted down in December, what do you think, from a Green perspective, should happen then?
Well, I think it's very clear that there isn't a clear majority in Parliament for any of the proposals, and that's why I think that the easiest way through this now is to ask the people what they think, and 60% of people now think we should have the people's vote. 75%, incidentally, don't think that the deal as negotiated bears any resemblance to what was actually offered to them back in June 2016, and that's another very strong argument for having the people's vote. And the polls show that now it would probably be about, you know, 55% in support of Remain. So the Remain, you know, the people's will has changed effectively, and the support for Remain is much stronger now. And I think that's the easiest and smoothest path forward to the best future for the country.
And you obviously spend a lot of time here in Brussels talking to the various leaders here. What do you think they make of the reaction that there's been to withdrawal agreement? Are they aware that possibly they will have to come back here mid-December and talk about reopening the withdrawal agreement?
Reopening negotiations is not a real option. It's an option being sold by extreme Brexiteers and by some in the Labour Party, but it's not a reality. It's not something that can actually happen. I think the reaction from other European leaders, and to be honest from my colleagues in the European Parliament, is we knew this was where we were going. There isn't any possibility of a cake and eat it deal. And I think what's really important to say is that this is really showing the difference between rhetoric and propaganda. You see Nigel Farage there basically just constantly being against something. But as soon as you put a real proposition on the table, you see that Brexit is really about trade-offs. And I think when a lot of people voted to leave back in June 2016, they weren't told about the downsides. They were told that they could have complete control of fishing. They weren't told that that would limit access to markets. They were told that they could have, you know, a new farming policy, but they weren't told that that might mean much greater tariffs if they exported their products into Europe. all sorts of people that I represent across the southwest of England will lose as a result of Brexit. And perhaps most importantly, the whole idea of free movement. Actually, 2/3 of people think free movement's a good idea when they see it as something we benefit from as well. But it was sold as something that we only lose from. And I think now we're seeing all the losses that Brexit brings. An awful lot of people are changing their minds and think we're better off staying in the EU.
Thanks a lot.
Molly Scott Cato, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts.